4 minutes ago, a single royal title pushed a father and son back to the edge of open war. Harry did not request permission, seek reconciliation, or quietly appeal for mercy. Instead, he signed a formal demand using the restricted style Prince Henry of Wales, declaring that his birthright entitled him to renewed access, recognition, and protection. When the document reached King Charles, the monarch's reaction was immediate, and far more furious than anyone inside the palace expected. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles read the signature twice. Alone in his private study, he held the final page near the light, removed his glasses, and set them sharply beside a silver pen. The royal household, the offices managing the sovereign's official duties, had received Harry's demand under a name palace officials had warned him not to use for independent business. He sought access to royal residences, ceremonial privileges, security discussions, and recognition as a senior-born prince. The king felt the insult before measuring the danger. This was not merely a dispute over protocol. Harry had taken the identity given to him at birth and turned it into pressure against his father. The restricted-style Prince Henry of Wales suggested an active royal connection that could mislead the public about who represented the crown. One concession could blur the line between family status and official authority. Then Charles found the handwritten note. Harry had given the palace 48 hours to acknowledge his claimed rights before he began using the title publicly. The threat changed everything. The demand had not been written only to reopen a door. It had been designed to force an answer, and any answer might later be displayed as proof that the crown had recognized him. Charles removed the file from routine correspondence and summoned Prince William. The future king entered minutes later, saw the paper lying alone at the center of the desk, and understood why no aid remained. His father pointed at the signature. He knew exactly what that name would do, he said. William did not answer quickly. He read the note, looked at the monarch, and saw anger hardening into betrayal. Then Charles revealed the detail that darkened the crisis. This was not Harry's first attempt to revive the forbidden title. An earlier incident had been buried quietly, and someone inside the palace had helped hide it from the people who trusted him most. The document may have triggered the explosion, but the true danger lay in the wounded men whose names, loyalties, and memories were now trapped inside it. Behind the royal language stood 3 men, bound by blood and divided by duty. Charles saw a son forcing his way through a door that remained emotionally open but institutionally closed. Harry saw a family using rules to erase what birth had once guaranteed. William stood between them, carrying the burden of a future crown while remembering the brother who had once walked beside him. The title dispute was public power, but beneath it lived private grief. Charles stared at the demand and felt 2 responsibilities tearing him in opposite directions. As sovereign, he had to protect the crown, the institution representing the monarch's official authority, duties, and public trust. As a father, he still wanted to believe that one honest conversation could reach the son hidden beneath the anger. That separation mattered, because one private concession could be misunderstood as official approval, while one cold refusal could destroy what little remained between them. Harry had already reached a different conclusion. In California, he read the final version of the demand while Meghan watched from across the room. His hand stopped above the signature line. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he pressed the pen down and wrote, "Prince Henry of Wales," slowly, as though every letter restored something the palace had taken from him. Meghan studied his face before asking whether he was prepared for permanent rejection. She understood that this was no ordinary request. A refusal could close private doors as well as official ones, and it could confirm Harry's deepest fear, that leaving royal duties had allowed the family to reduce his identity piece by piece. He looked at her and answered, "The rejection already happened. I'm forcing them to admit it." William understood his father's fury, but the signature unsettled him for another reason. He remembered childhood letters sent from school, pages signed with the same name when it carried no threat, no calculation, and no public challenge. The future king felt the distance between those memories and the document now resting on the desk. His brother had once used that name to belong. Now he was using it to demand entry. Charles warned him that even granting a private meeting under the disputed style could be presented as royal recognition. Harry might claim the palace had accepted his right to act with renewed authority. The king feared that family mercy would be turned into institutional proof, and that mattered, because royal recognition could affect public trust, ceremonial access, and future claims connected to Harry's children. Harry closed the leather folder after Meghan left the room. He unfolded an old photograph showing himself beside William and Charles, stared at it, and placed it behind the demand. The gesture revealed what the legal language concealed. He was not only fighting for status, he was fighting against the feeling that his place in the family had vanished. William turned to the final page and noticed 4 carefully chosen words. The Sandringham assurance remains binding. His expression changed. The phrase referred to an old private promise that had never appeared in any public agreement, yet Harry had written it as though the crown had already accepted his claim. To understand why he believed the palace still owed him recognition, the story had to return to the private ceremony, where one sentence became a promise, and later, a weapon. Years before the furious document reached the king's desk, one private conversation planted the seed of this confrontation. It happened after a restricted family gathering at Sandringham. When cameras were gone, aides had stepped away, and Harry believed his future was still negotiable. Charles spoke as a father rather than a future monarch. Harry heard reassurance. William heard caution. What followed was never written into the official record. Yet every word survived in memory, and one sentence became the point of no return. Harry had entered that period believing he could leave senior royal duties without losing the identity that had shaped his entire life. Senior royal duties meant the official public work carried out on behalf of the sovereign, including ceremonies, engagements, representation, and institutional responsibilities. The family was trying to separate love from status, private access from public authority, and personal support from official funding and security. That separation mattered because one blurred promise could later be treated as permission. Charles understood the danger, but he also saw a wounded son standing in front of him. During a private gathering near the Sandringham Chapel, Harry asked whether he would always be received as your son and as a prince. The future monarch answered softly, "Nothing can take away who you were born to be." William immediately stepped in, warning that family identity could never be used as public authority. Harry carried those words differently. To him, Prince Henry of Wales was not simply an old style. It tied him to childhood, to his father's former title, and to the person he had been before marriage, withdrawal, and exile from royal life. He treated the promise as permanent protection. Charles believed he had offered emotional reassurance, not institutional permission. Years later, Betrayal entered the room through a copied page. A former royal secretary had recorded the Sandringham exchange in a confidential written summary, noting that Harry immediately asked whether the assurance could be cited in future negotiations. That documented account had never been intended for public or legal use, yet William found an extract attached to the new demand. The prince read the copied lines twice. Someone with access to protected palace records had helped construct Harry's challenge, and that discovery mattered, because the dispute was no longer only between brothers or between father and son. It now suggested a breach inside the household itself. Charles lifted the page and read his own words aloud. He stopped halfway through the sentence, closed the folder, and sat in silence. His anger changed into something colder. A moment of tenderness had been preserved as evidence against him, and the son he had tried to comfort was now using that memory to force recognition from the crown. The king made his decision without raising his voice. Harry would be confronted directly, but the disputed title would not be spoken, recorded, or accepted as a condition of entry. With the buried promise exposed and trust already shattered, father and son moved toward a meeting in which even the name used at the door would become an act of defiance. The confrontation did not begin inside a grand chamber. It began outside a closed door. Harry arrived expecting to be received under the title written on his demand, but the equerry waiting in the corridor addressed him only by his ducal name. He corrected the man once, then again. Inside, Charles could hear every word. When the door finally opened, neither father nor son moved forward to embrace. The silence between them carried years of accusation before either man spoke. Harry had accepted strict terms before arriving. No lawyers, no media representatives, no personal advisors. The appointment record listed only his ducal name, a courtesy title linked to his peerage rather than active royal authority, and the palace refused to add the disputed style. That detail mattered because even a private acknowledgement could later be presented as proof that the crown had accepted his claim. Charles wanted one final conversation as a father, but he entered knowing every word could carry institutional weight. William waited in an adjoining room. The future king had agreed to remain close but silent, because his father wanted no courtier, advisor, or heir standing between him and his son. That choice mattered for another reason. If the meeting failed without any institutional buffer, neither man could blame the machinery of the palace. Harry placed the demand on the table. "You told me no one could take this from me," he said. Charles did not lower his eyes. "I spoke to my son. You turned it into an order." The words struck harder than shouting. Harry accused his father of allowing courtiers to erase him in stages, first from duties, then from protection, and finally from the language of belonging. The king answered that leaving responsibility while demanding its symbols had created the very distance now being blamed on others. Then Charles revealed what palace investigators had uncovered through a documented internal inquiry. The confidential Sandringham extract had been traced to a former household aide who recently communicated with Harry's legal representatives. The discovery mattered because the copied record had not surfaced by accident. Someone had carried a private family memory into a calculated institutional challenge. Harry denied authorizing any improper access. Yet when his father asked him to surrender the copied record, he refused. He argued that the page proved the palace had admitted privately what it denied publicly, and he would not return the only evidence protecting his version of the past. Charles slid the demand back across the table. Harry did not touch it. The monarch pushed his chair away, stood, and declared that no family meeting would continue under a title used to pressure the crown. Harry reached the door, stopped, and looked back. "Then I'll use it where you cannot ignore it," he said. Before the world, Harry had challenged his father face to face, but the final decision would not rest on anger alone. It would be shaped by the quieter powers controlling what the monarchy could recognize. After Harry left the room, Charles remained standing beside the empty chair. The king's anger had not disappeared, but it had been overtaken by exhaustion. William entered without ceremony and read the final page in silence. Unlike his father, the heir did not react to the emotional accusations. He focused on the language, the deadlines, and the intended pressure. Then he reached one conclusion. The demand was not simply asking for recognition. It was testing whether the crown could be forced. Charles still held the power to decide how members of the family were formally represented by the royal household. That authority mattered because the household did more than manage family appearances. It controlled who could speak, attend, and act in the monarch's name. Advisors guarded the line between hereditary identity, meaning the status someone receives by birth, and active royal function, meaning the official duties carried out for the crown. William saw that line as the heart of the crisis. The future king had become increasingly responsible for protecting institutional continuity, especially when private concessions could create public expectations or rival centers of influence. One emotional exception might look small inside the family, but outside it could be treated as a permanent rule. The prince placed the document down. "If you answer from guilt, you will only postpone the pain," he told his father, "and when it returns, it will be worse." Charles resented the coldness in those words. He still saw the frightened child beneath Harry's defiance, the boy who once reached for him without thinking about titles or power. Yet William did not step back. He admitted that rejecting the claim might destroy what remained between the brothers, but accepting it would teach Harry that pressure could overturn every previous agreement. Then a palace legal advisor entered, with a documented analysis of the demand. One clause sought recognition not only for Harry, but for the future public use of princely styles connected to his children. The revelation changed the weight of the entire document. It was no longer a personal appeal. It was a pathway toward broader ceremonial participation and future royal representation. William read the clause again and understood the design. If the palace accepted the disputed title once, Harry could later argue that the recognition extended beyond himself. A single meeting could become precedent, and precedent meant an earlier decision used to justify later claims. Charles remained alone after the advisors withdrew, turning his signet ring slowly around his finger. The ring carried the sovereign's personal mark, a symbol of decisions made in his name. William returned quietly, placed a drafted refusal beside him, and did not ask for a signature. Before dawn, the king finally made his choice. But as the pen touched the page, a leaked photograph of Harry's signed demand began circulating beyond the palace. The crown had prepared its answer in private, yet someone had already carried the forbidden name beyond the palace walls, and the fallout could no longer be contained. By morning, the answer was final. Charles signed a formal refusal, declaring that Harry's birth as a prince remained part of his personal identity, but no restricted territorial style could be used to claim official access, authority, security, or representation. The wording was precise. The emotional impact was devastating. When Harry received the sealed response, he read the first paragraph standing up. By the final line, he had lowered himself into a chair and stopped speaking completely. Charles had drawn a line between family and institution. The refusal stated that Harry would not be received, listed, accredited, or granted privileges under Prince Henry of Wales. Accreditation meant formal approval to appear or act in an official capacity, and the palace made clear that no such approval would follow from the disputed name. Future contact could continue only as private family communication, separate from royal authority. Harry felt the distinction as a calculated wound. The palace could call him a beloved son in private, yet deny the dignity and power he believed came with being born royal. That mattered, because the title was tied to more than ceremony in his mind. It represented belonging, protection, and proof that leaving official duties had not erased his place inside the family. Charles felt no triumph. After signing, he kept his hand on the page for several seconds and asked whether the words sounded as though they came from a father or only from a king. William did not answer immediately. The future monarch understood that softening the language might comfort Harry, but it could also reopen the exact route the refusal was meant to close. Then the leak began reshaping the crisis. The photograph circulating online showed Harry's restricted signature, but it concealed the page containing claims connected to his children. Public sympathy grew around the image of a rejected son, while the wider reach of the demand remained hidden. The omission mattered because viewers saw a fight over identity, not a request that could influence future ceremonial standing. Palace staff traced the leak through a documented internal review. The image had been released before Harry entered the meeting with his father. That timing changed everything. It suggested the public confrontation had been prepared in advance, rather than caused by the king's refusal. Meghan watched Harry fold the royal response into thirds. He began to tear it, stopped, and placed it beside the old photograph of himself, William, and Charles. She asked what he intended to do next. He answered by opening a recording file, already prepared on his desk. Harry began rehearsing a statement, defending his use of the title. Minutes before publication, his phone rang. William's name appeared on the screen. The official channels had failed. The palace response had hardened, and only one unguarded conversation remained capable of changing the direction of the crisis. There were no secretaries on the call, no legal language, and no royal titles. William said only, "Harry, listen before you release anything." For the first time since the crisis began, the younger brother heard his name without accusation or ceremony. The conversation that followed did not repair their relationship, but it stripped away the arguments surrounding it. Two sons spoke about their father, their childhood, and the difference between being born into a family and demanding the authority to speak for it. William called because he knew the recorded statement could turn a private family rupture into a permanent battle over royal legitimacy. That meant a public fight over who had the right to represent the monarchy and claim its authority. He asked for one condition before continuing. Nothing from the conversation would be quoted, recorded, or used in later negotiations. Harry agreed, removing the advisors and official barriers that had shaped every earlier exchange. Harry spoke first. He admitted that Prince Henry of Wales was more than a title to him. It belonged to the boy he had been before grief, marriage, departure, and public hostility changed everything. Using it felt like reaching backward for a version of himself who still knew where he belonged. He said the palace had treated that old identity as though it had become dangerous, simply because he had chosen a different life. William did not dismiss the pain. The future king told his brother that the old title could not restore the old relationship, and forcing Charles to recognize a claim would never produce the love or apology Harry actually wanted. The words cut deeply because they exposed the need hidden beneath the demand. He was not only seeking access, he wanted proof that his father still saw him. Then William revealed what had happened inside the palace through a confidential conversation with the king. Several advisors had urged Charles to issue a harsher order, publicly prohibiting every future use of the disputed style. Their father refused. He chose to defend the boundary without erasing Harry's personal identity as a prince. Harry fell silent. After several seconds, he admitted something he had never placed in the written demand. He knew it would probably fail. His real purpose was to force Charles to answer directly, rather than allowing palace officials to hide behind silence. He wanted rejection from his father's hand, not from an unnamed office. The room around him felt suddenly smaller. Harry opened the recorded statement and deleted its first line, which introduced him under the disputed title. He did not cancel the message, but he removed the deliberate provocation. William offered one final compromise. His brother would publish the refusal accurately, and the palace would release the full reason behind it, including the wider claims concealed by the leak. For the first time, neither side had won. But when the full truth reached the public, the meaning of Harry's forbidden signature changed overnight. The dispute exploded across Britain before breakfast. One newspaper filled its front page with Harry's handwritten signature beneath the words, "The Prince Who Demanded Entry." Another accused the palace of punishing a son for remembering who he was. Outside Buckingham Palace, supporters and critics gathered behind the barriers, arguing over birthright, duty, and exile. Yet one newly released paragraph changed the debate. Harry's request had not concerned a name alone. It sought official privileges extending into the next generation. The palace answered with measured language. Its statement confirmed that Harry remained a prince by birth, but he could not use a restricted territorial style to obtain active royal authority or institutional privileges. A territorial style is a title linked to a royal family's place and public role. And the distinction mattered because recognition could influence who appeared to speak for the crown. The response defended family identity while refusing to turn that identity into official power. Harry released a recorded statement of his own. He acknowledged making the demand and insisted that he had acted to defend dignity, fair treatment, and his place within the family, not to create a rival court. That phrase meant a competing center of royal influence outside the monarch's control, and he rejected it with visible frustration. Yet the full document was now public, and its hidden reach could no longer be denied. Charles watched the coverage from a breakfast room with the sound muted. Camilla sat beside him and noticed his expression change when a broadcaster described the refusal as a father formally closing the door on his son. The king looked away, but she understood the wound. He had protected the institution, yet the world had reduced the decision to one broken relationship. Harry faced a different shock outside a media studio. Supporters chanted his name, but one placard declared him Britain's rightful alternative prince. He stopped when he saw it. The slogan offered public devotion, yet it also placed him in a role he had never openly claimed and made William's warning feel suddenly real. Then commentators reached the paragraph that shifted the national mood. Harry had requested future recognition pathways for his children, confirming the demand could create a lasting precedent. Viewers who had seen only a wounded son now saw a claim capable of shaping future ceremonial access and royal representation. Outside Buckingham Palace, one young man raised a sign reading, "A son is not a state." Beside him, an older woman held another, "Duty gives titles meaning." A broadcaster framed both signs together and called them the image of a divided Britain. The world had delivered its judgment loudly, but the decisive verdict would come in silence. From a son deciding what he was willing to lose, and a father deciding what could still be saved. The crisis ended not with a ceremony or public surrender, but with two short messages sent before midnight. Harry informed the palace that he would withdraw his demand for recognition under Prince Henry of Wales. Charles replied that his son's place in the family would never depend on a document, but his place within the working monarchy could not be restored through pressure. Neither man apologized for everything. Neither received everything he wanted, yet both finally accepted the boundary the forbidden title had exposed. Harry sent the withdrawal through a formal private message, and agreed not to use the disputed territorial style to seek official access, security authority, ceremonial standing, or representation from the crown. A territorial style is a royal form of address, connected to place, rank, and public position. Its withdrawal mattered because it ended the route he had tried to use to reclaim institutional influence without returning to the duties that once supported it. Charles answered with equal clarity. He confirmed that his son's identity by birth would remain personally acknowledged, but royal authority would still depend on service, constitutional responsibility, and agreed obligations. That distinction protected the monarchy from becoming a collection of personal claims, and it protected future decisions from being shaped by ancestry alone. Harry opened the public statement he had prepared and removed the disputed title from every page. He kept the original signed demand inside the leather folder, but no longer as a weapon. It became proof of how close anger had brought him to cutting the family connection beyond repair. The words remained, yet their purpose had changed. Charles placed the withdrawal beside the refusal he had signed. Instead of ordering both documents into separate files, the king directed that they be stored together as one record. Fatherhood and sovereignty had nearly become enemies, and he wanted the final archive to show that neither had completely defeated the other. William's private intervention became the true turning point. The future king had not restored trust between the brothers, and he had not erased years of resentment. But through an unrecorded conversation, he forced Harry to separate the emotional need to belong from the institutional desire to be recognized. That difference saved the crisis from becoming permanent. The monarchy emerged with one clear principle. Birth could provide identity, history, and personal connection, but it could not independently command royal authority after responsibility had been surrendered. Harry's attempt failed because a title could not force open the institution he had left. Then Charles sent one final line, without ceremony or formal style. "You do not need a title to speak to me as my son." Harry read it alone, closed the folder, and replied, "Then speak to me as my father." The forbidden name did not return Harry to royal power. It forced father and son to confront the truth that blood could preserve a bond, but only humility could prevent that bond from being destroyed. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.